Today on This Week in Space, Jason Snell of SixColors.com joins Tariq and me to discuss the greatest space books, both fiction and non, of all time. Join us.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is This Week in Space, episode number 46, recorded January 27th, 2023. Best space books ever. This episode of This Week in Space is brought to you by Bitwarden. Get the password manager that offers a robust and cost-effective solution that can drastically increase your chances of staying safe online. Get started with a free trial of a Teams or Enterprise plan, or get started for free across all devices as an individual user at bitwarden.com/twit. And by ACI Learning. If you love IT Pro, you'll love ACI Learning. ACI Learning offers fully customizable training for your team in formats for all types of learners across audit, cybersecurity, and IT. From entry-level training to putting people on the moon, ACI Learning has got you covered. Visit go.acilearning.com/twit to learn more. Hello and welcome to another episode of This Week in Space, the very best space books edition. I'm Rod Pyle, editor-in-chief of Ad Astra Magazine. And I'm joined by the consistently underrated Tariq Malik, editor-in-chief at space.com. How are you today, Tariq?
I'm doing well. Probably need some more coffee, but that's easily remedied, Rod, on Earth. Not so much in space, but at least I've got my mug right next to me right now. So,
all right, and what a mug you have. We are joined today by a true hero of the TWiT universe, Jason Snell. Jason runs the Six Colors website with Dan Warren, covering all things Apple, and is the supreme ruler of the incomparable podcast network and co-host of TWiT's very own, wait for it, MacBreak Weekly, which covers pop culture and much more. How you doing, Jason?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here. I'll also put in a plug. I am the host of a once regular, now irregular podcast on Relay FM called Liftoff, where we talk about space and related subjects, but we don't do it very often. We do it like 5 times a year now. We used to do it every other week and we sort of retired it. But so it's great to be on a space podcast again, is what I'm saying. It's been a while.
Well, if I had known you were competition, I wouldn't have invited you to come.
I was going to say competition.
We gave up. I'm retired from that now. We gave up on that. So we you win. You win.
How can you give up? New Space is just getting interesting again.
It is. When we started that podcast like 6-7 years ago, we thought there was no way we were going to be able to even do a show every other week. We were going to have to do explainers about like the planets and all that. And then by the end, it was just like there was so much news every other week. And it was mostly because my co-host Stephen Hackett and I were busy with other stuff, and it was not. We had to make some tough decisions, and it was like it was fun to do, but it was also work to do there's so much space news every couple of weeks. So we kind of just decided to let others, looking at you now, others do that and be on that treadmill, and we would just sit back and listen and watch. So, but it's great. It's a super, we did not know 8 years ago or 6 years ago, whenever that was that we started it, that space would get so busy so fast like it has.
It's like drinking from a fire hose, I think.
It's amazing. It just in the last, because when we went in, it was the sort of the gap where Commercial Crew was still spinning up, and right, things were in place, but there was sort of nothing happened, and then everything started to happen, and it got. It's been a wild ride. I went to the last shuttle launch, and I remember it being like, okay, we're gonna do new stuff soon, and then there was a gap there, right? But now we're back.
Did you cry, Jason? Because I cried. I cried when it launched, and then I cried again when it landed, and it was very sad.
I didn't, but there were a lot of emotions happening as I'm watching that thing punch through the clouds. It was quite a, including like, oh my God, that the fire from the rocket is so white. It's like the whitest thing I've ever seen in my life was the stuff coming off of the SRBs of the shuttle in that last launch. But so we're back now. It's things are busy. Things are busy in space. As you know, there's plenty to talk about.
That's right.
So Tariq, this was STS-135 you're talking about, right?
That's right. Atlantis.
So where were you? Yeah. Just you don't need to show off your trivia knowledge. Where were you viewing from?
Me or Jason?
You.
Oh no! So I and actually our spaceflight editor Mike Wall were at the press site at 39A watching it, and it was a kind of an interesting bookend for me because for Mike it was his first launch and it lifted off on the first try, and I was very envious because
unusual for the shuttle. Yeah,
my first launch was 114 and it did not lift off for 2 weeks, and I stayed the entire time. So it was.
So we were there together for 135 because I was there. I was there for the NASA social thing, and I watched from the the auxiliary grandstand that's like around the corner from the tents. And yeah, that was an amazing moment. Lesson of like they were like 30% chance of it going today, and it's like 30% chance means there's a 30% chance, and it went. And we didn't get to follow it up because there was a cloud deck, so it basically made this. Punched a circle of fire through the clouds and was gone. But it was quite a show. That was a big deal.
Well, and when you get the low cloud deck, it's a lot louder. So there is that. Tariq, you usually get the good seats. You get to go see the launches because your media outlet has a larger travel budget than mine. But I just want you to know, from me to you with love, that I was a guest of the center director for that launch and sitting in his bleachers.
Wow, the special one,
which is cooler than that Star Trek chair of yours.
I heard they have food over at those bleachers. So
well, I think they had like Vienna sausages or something.
I'll tell everyone a story about Rocket Lab's launch this week that was fun to go see at the end of the episode. That'll be my sign off for that. So
all right. Well, before you go there, we have a new space joke from me to Jason with love. Are we ready? What do you call a fight between a Martian and a social media introvert?
Ooh, I do not know. What?
I don't know.
Alien versus Redditor.
That's a good one.
Oh man, he didn't even smirk.
Glad you got the sound effects there. Wow. Oh
yeah.
No, that was a body blow. I felt that one in my chest.
Yeah, if it's not for the sound effects, it would be pretty sad. Well, okay. So, as always, we invite you to join Team Tariq and send us your best or worst space joke. We'll take either, as you can probably tell. And don't forget to do us a solid and make sure to like, subscribe, and all that good podcast stuff for us because, heck, we're free, so why wouldn't you? All right, let's get to some headlines. Tariq.
Yes.
We had one of those oh-so-frequent close passes of an asteroid. It was detected kind of at the last minute.
Gonna kill us all, Rod.
But this was a little closer and a little more last minute than most. It wasn't huge, but big enough to raise some eyebrows, right?
That's right. Asteroid BU 2023, brand new. They discovered it like on Sunday or something crazy like that for this week, and it flew within like 2,200 miles. So that's like less than a trip across the country, of the Earth. Actually on what's today? Today is our Friday day. So it was just yesterday, last night. It flew right by the planet, below a lot of satellites, and of course there was your regular sky is falling series of how it's going to kill us all. It's about the size of a car, So to put that in perspective, the Chicxulub impact was much bigger for the
even Chelyabinsk was bigger than this.
Chelyabinsk was about the size of like a minivan, if memory serves, bit
60
bigger.
feet.
Yeah. So a semi truck, and so it would have burned up in the atmosphere if it had hit us. Maybe some meteorites on the ground, but good, fun to track. We actually had live tracking on space.com with the virtual telescope project. They were tracking it live. So, just a fun exercise to see, and a good reminder that these kinds of things happen every day, whether we know about them, like this one, or not. So it's nothing to be truly worried about, but the fact that we're finding them is a good thing, but we do have to look harder. So.
Yep. I did a interview with a guy who used to be an astronaut, Ed Liu, about the B612 Foundation, and I was, and the whole idea there is to promote vigilance about asteroids and near Earth asteroids, and we went into that interview thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna not be able to sleep tonight. It's gonna be like the destruction of the Earth is right around the corner, and I ended up feeling pretty good. Like we have got never say never, right? But like we have got an increasingly good handle on our neighborhood and what's out there. And just recently in the last couple of decades, we've made so much progress. So like, if you're like, you check out an old book at the library that said, we don't know where any of the asteroids are, like it's not actually true anymore, and that's reassuring as a human who lives on planet Earth, right?
Oh, yeah. We
have a better sense now.
You are 100% right, Jason. NASA has found about 90% of the planet killer size asteroids that come near Earth. And of course, the big open question is anything that comes from the direction of the sun. And there are plans to launch that NEO surveyor, which Ed Lou, I'm sure, would have talked about. And they've had their own plans too at B612 to look much more comprehensively for those kinds of asteroids too. So.
And let me just put a pitch in for Neo Surveyor, because this poor spacecraft has been going through conniption fits refunding for 12 years, I believe.
Yeah,
it's been called 3 different things. This is its 3rd naming, and it's gotten so close. And I mean, it's pretty simple. You know, you want to have a telescope in orbit to try and spot the big rocks that are hurtling at our planet, especially ones close to the sun that you can't see on the ground very well. It just seems like a slam dunk, especially when you look at some of the other things that get funded, but it's had a very tough course, and it's still not fully full speed ahead, as I understand. So yeah, we have some work to do there. All right, let's move to the next story.
Yes.
DARPA's getting into the atomic rocket business. So we've been talking about nuclear rockets since the late 40s, early 50s in one form or another. Of course, my favorite is Project Orion, the big bang bang rocket that just uses atomic warheads.
It's very nuclear.
Yeah, that's as nuclear as it gets, and very, very showy. But in this case, we're talking about nuclear thermal. And just a bit of a backgrounder, this has actually been prototyped in the 60s and early 70s with a project called Rover and then NERVA, and worked really well and was fired for, I think, a total of many hours, which you can't do with chemical rockets, and worked. And then the environmental movement kind of kicked up and NASA's funding kind of ticked down, and that was the end of NERVA. So we're back, right?
Yeah. So DARPA, it's interesting because DARPA has this program called the Demonstration Rocket for Agile Cislunar Operations, and if that's a big mouthful for you, you can just call it Draco for short, like Malfoy, the bad wizard. Cool. And the interesting thing for me is that it's cislunar, so they are looking for this new nuclear engine for missions around or near the moon. And NASA this week announced that they are joining the project with DARPA to try to get an in-space demonstration by 2027. That is not far away. My daughter will still be in high school. You know, she's just going into it next year. So so we'll see how that works. And you know, the NASA administrator himself announced this with DARPA at a big AIAA meeting this week. So they seem to be all in to try to use this as a way to get to Mars quickly. So if you've seen a lot of headlines about how they can get to Mars in a month or so, that's what this rocket, they're hoping that they're going to be able to do that because of that continued thrust.
Well, okay, wait a minute. You just said a month. Everything I understood, this would cut like maybe 25% off of a 6 to 7 month trip. Yeah.
People are they're hopeful that they can get it to 45 days is what I was seeing about like some which is crazy if they can get it there, right? But there's been other pie in the sky engines that we've heard about. Vasmir is one that Franklin
Chang Diaz.
Has been pushing too. So we'll see if they ever live up to that hype. But the whole idea is that it would cut down that transit time immensely, so you don't have 6 months.
So how quickly can Elon redesign Starship to take nuclear thermal? Because I mean, it's going to be very, you know, if he gets up there with chemical engines and is this reminds me of a story by A.E. von Vogt, I think, called Far Centaurus, where the first, Jason, I assume you read that.
I don't know if I've read that one.
It's the first, so there's a first generational colony ship basically going to Alpha Centauri, but then 100 years later, while they're still in transit, they're passed up by newer technology, and they get to Alpha Centauri finally and realize, you know, that humans don't have BO anymore and they do, and humans don't have hair anymore than they do, and it's considered savage and all this kind of stuff. It was a cute story. So maybe that'll happen to
That's Starship. The worst thing, to get there and there's somebody already there because they came in a faster ship. Right. This is also, I would imagine this is also going to be interesting for NASA in terms of access to the outer solar system in general, right? Because it's so slow to get out there, where you see these missions that are like the Europa Clipper that's coming up, where it's sort of like it's gonna do like a lot of gravity passes in the inner solar system just to pick up the speed required to get to the outer solar system. It would be nice if there were some other thrust options out there, wouldn't it?
Well, and I think that that mission's going to take, what, 7 years to get to target?
Yeah, it's a long time.
Yeah.
Slow going to get out there.
That's too long. Well, I'm really excited about this because I'm older than you guys, and I can remember when this was actually going on, and it was like, wait a minute, what do you mean you're not going to do your atomic rocket? That makes a whole lot of sense. But of course, you know, it was the same thing with the Apollo system in general. It's like, yeah, we don't need this hardware anymore.
If anybody out there watched For All Mankind, this is actually they took the NERVA proposal and kind of like went with it, and so some of those enormous rockets and the stuff they do in season 2, especially 2 and 3 of For All Mankind are this kind of thing, except of course with the danger, because it's a TV show, so there's the danger part of it. That's right. Scary. Don't be scared.
Yeah, I think the part of that show that bothered me the most, well, there was 2 things, if I may wax critical for a moment. One was how much of the soap opera mom staying at home stuff we had to endure between the stuff we wanted to see. And the other was having the Saturn V blow up and kill von Braun. That really bugged me. I mean, I get that it's a dramatic point and that Ron Moore likes dramatic points, but come on now.
It's his job to make it dramatic.
I know, but you can't kill von Braun. That's just not cool. Okay. James Webb Space Telescope. We've had a couple little glitches, nothing serious. We've had some micrometeoroid impacts and the occasional instrument concern. This one seems like it's a little more concerning than the others, Star.
That's right. Yeah. So this week we found out that, well, actually it happened on January 15th. We just found out about it. But James Webb Space Telescope's Near Infrared Imager and Slitless Spectrograph. That's another mouthful of an instrument name. They call it NIRIS for short. Has had like a communications delay within the instrument. They think that one of the modes is kind of acting pretty wonky, and so its flight software basically timed out, and so they can't really use it for science, which is unfortunate because it's one of the kind of the key spectrograph tools that they use to study those depths of space. And so they're saying that it's paused science observations for now. They're going to have to reschedule a lot of them, but that most of the space telescope, $10 billion worth in all, is still in good health out there at the Lagrange point that it's off, gazing at the deep space universe. So this instrument came from the Canadian Space Agency and as a contribution, and so they are trying to troubleshoot it to see like what they can do, because it has 4 different modes that they can use, and it uses it can work as a camera when other James Webb instruments are occupied, which is really good, and it also studies light signatures to study the atmospheres of exoplanets, which scientists really want to look at. So they would like to get this back. And I think we didn't mention the other stories that we've been talking about. This was also from space.com as well that we were seeing, but
we should mention these are all from space.com.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. But it's not the first one that's run into trouble. The MIRI instrument on the observatory, a mid-infrared a tool, also had some issues, and they were able to kind of get through that too. So I think that they'll work this one out. It happened on the anniversary, 1 year to the day that that James Webb arrived at its Lagrange point home. So kind of a bittersweet twist to kind of start that anniversary with a glitch, but they'll get through it.
Well, for anybody who's feeling critical of this instrument or this project, I would just remind us all that when the Hubble got on mission up in orbit and started operating, we discovered that the optics weren't properly configured, so that required a servicing mission just to be able to get the thing to focus. So given that, and given that the Webb went up and had to carry out something like 470 separate mechanical actuations to get it to actually work, I'm feeling kind of glass half full. How about you, Jason?
Yeah, it's anybody who lived through the many Hubble servicing missions by the space shuttle, and actually felt really nervous about James Webb being so far away, where we can't send the repairman up there to fix it. Right. So, and also, I just having followed space long enough, it's scary when you have an instrument behaving like this. But boy, the people who run these instruments are so talented at building them to have multiple pathways and redundant systems and different ways to reboot the software or change the modes and do all sorts of stuff remotely in order to keep these things running. So optimism is always the order of the day because they have proven time and again to be able to pull, amazing tricks. But yeah, Hubble is up on the list, right? Of like, they turned it on and it was like, it didn't work. And with JWST, we can't like go fix it, put the spectacles on it. They have to do it all remotely. And, think about what if you could only use your computer remotely and never could like turn the power on and off. That would be not a good idea, right? Not a good idea.
Well, especially if it's a PC like Tariq is using. I meant to mention that. And actually, Jason, when I introduced you, I forgot to mention that I've got my Performance 630 here that isn't working properly with my printer, so I want to talk to you about that after the show.
All right, that's great. We'll hop on that G4 Cube behind me and figure if we can do some troubleshooting there.
Okay, there we go. All right, and finally, on a lighter note, Buzz Aldrin gets married again at 93. We're all very happy for Buzz. Let's wish him well. He's been married a couple of times. I think he got it right this time.
This is his fourth marriage, Rod.
I know, but Anka. So his new wife is Anka. I think her last name is pronounced Four, and she's a lovely lady from Europe. And I have to say, I've spent a moderate amount of time with them, and they are actually a really sweet, cute couple. And I was thrilled when I heard this. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever get married again, but big kudos to him for doing so.
I hope that when I'm 93, I'm as put together that I can walk down the aisle if I need to for that. Hopefully not. Never gonna live to be 100. I think that's the plan. But he said that they were as excited as eloping teenagers when he announced it on Twitter. I think actually is where he announced that they had been married, and they've been together for a long time.
About 10 years, I think.
Anka's been part of the Buzz Aldrin Ventures for I think since 2019. She's the executive vice president there, so they've been working together as a couple for no small time. So it was it's not often that the second person on the moon gets married at a vintage age, and we thought it'd be fun to highlight that. So hats off, and I hope they have a great time together.
Well, and it was a small ceremony, so there wasn't anybody there to mow him that he had to deck to get out of the wedding. So that was good.
That's right.
That was pretty amazing.
Did he really land on the moon? Did they really get married, Rod?
My God.
Go ask.
It's been a while since I've seen that footage, but it was so astonishing. And I don't think there was anybody either within the doubter community or not who didn't think that Buzz was justified in putting that guy out. He gave him plenty of warnings. Let's take a break to talk for a moment about our sponsor, Bitwarden. Bitwarden's the only open source cross-platform password manager that can be used at home, at work, or on the go and is trusted by millions. Even our very own Steve Gibson has switched over. With Bitwarden, you can securely store credentials across personal and business worlds. January 22nd through 28th is Data Privacy Week, leading up to Data Privacy Day. Bitwarden would like to remind everyone that your data is valuable and so is your privacy. All of your data in your Bitwarden vault is end-to-end encrypted, and not just your passwords. That's including URLs for all websites you have accounts for. Bitwarden doesn't track your data in the mobile apps, only crash reporting, and even that is removed in the F-Droid installation. Bitwarden is open source and invites anyone to review library implementations at any time on GitHub, and also to review the Bitwarden privacy policies at bitwarden.com/privacy. Protect your personal data and privacy with Bitwarden by adding security to your passwords with strong, randomly generated passwords for each account. And you can go a step further with the username generator and create unique usernames for each account as well, or even use any of the 5 integrated email alias services. Bitwarden offers email alias generation with simple login, Firefox Relay, Fastmail, and now DuckDuckGo. These services will allow you to create a masked email address, one that you could use for only one website, for example, and forwards any emails to your primary email account. This keeps your main email address out of the databases of the services and sites you sign up for. Bitwarden is a must-need for your business. It's fully customizable and adapts to your business needs. Their Teams organization option is $3 per month per user, and their enterprise organization plan is $5 per month per user. Share private data security with coworkers across departments or the entire company. Individuals can use their basic free account forever for an unlimited number of passwords, or upgrade any time to their premium account for less than $1 a month. The family organization option gives up to 6 users premium features for only $3.33 a month. Bitwarden supports importing and migrating from many other programs too. Look, at TWiT, we're fans of password managers. Bitwarden is the only open source cross-platform password manager that can be used at home, on the go, or at work, and is trusted by millions of individuals, teams, and organizations worldwide. Get started with a free trial of a Teams or Enterprise plan, or get started for free across all devices as an individual user at bitwarden.com/twit. That's bitwarden.com/twit. So, guys, let's talk about some space books.
Yeah, let's get to it.
Because that's sort of why we're here. Right. I wanted to start with nonfiction books. And Tariq, you intended to run this as kind of a round table, so let's do that.
Yeah,
But in general, let me just say, this is, so I write a lot in this area, only nonfiction, because I love my readers and I would never want to put them through my efforts at fiction. And, it's a niche sector. So you're seeing more books coming out on this topic from small publishers or self-published, but fewer from the major publishers. And one thing you're not going to see much of anymore is big coffee table books. And one thing you will never see again, probably, are the books that had little inclusions and things glued into them, sadly, because the industry's economics have just shifted so much. That said, there's a lot of good stuff coming out, and we all have our historical favorites. So, Tariq, why don't you lead off and tell us some of yours?
Yeah, just a big preamble on our format. So and for Jason and your sake, is I thought, because we've got a nice long list of nonfiction books here, and I think we might, if we've got time, talk about some sci-fi too. That was very pivotal. Absolutely. That we'll go in a little circle. So I'll do one, and then Jason, you'll be up next, and then Rod, you can round out the trio, and then we'll start over again.
Follow up, Charlie. Yeah.
And just to be clear about my picks, I kind of made some selections based on ones that were really important to me personally, to kind of push me on my voyage, if you will, to the stars. And the first one that I picked actually is called Our Universe. It is one of those coffee table books that you mentioned, Rod, from 1980, and National Geographic published it, and it was this mighty tome that I used to read on the floor of our dining room, because that was where the book was stored, on the bottom shelf, I guess, where I could reach it. And the reason I picked that as kind of my first one is because that's what I remember reading all the time. I would just flip through the pages when I was bored, even though I had read it like a million times, because it had your standard, this is what the solar system is like. Here's the sun. It had these gorgeous kind of sci-fi-esque landscapes of what Mars might look like up close, based on some of the photos they had at that time in 1980. The ships that we were going to get after the space shuttle, which hadn't even started flying. It was just getting tested at that time, and I was hooked. I think that was like the book that kind of really set me on the way for everything. And we still have it at my parents' house. It's in the same bookshelf that it was when I was growing up. And I still, I went just, over the holidays and flipped through it and waxed poetically about how there's an illustration of what an ice skating alien on Pluto that eats sound waves would look like, that far out, with these big hoops as a sail on the back. And I mean, if you're looking for inspiration, that was where mine started, I think, at that point in time, was having access to that book and just checking it out all the time. And that's when I started for that.
I'll bet even this time you still read it on your parents' dining room floor, didn't you? You got a couple of boxes and some blankets and made a little pillow for it and drew some instrumentation on the front. Okay.
I'm a big boy. I can sit on the couch now. So.
Okay. It's good your mom finally gave you the clearance to sit on the couch. Jason, how about you?
I can't remember the name of the book. There was a book about the solar system that I read when I was in first grade, that it was like, it listed all the planets and facts about them, and that was the one that really captured my attention. But it's probably out of print, and I have no idea what it was named. I'm going to go with it's not a draft, but I guess it's sort of a draft. A Man on the Moon by Andrew Chaikin, which was the source of From the Earth to the Moon, the miniseries on HBO that Tom Hanks produced. And it's just, I mean, the Apollo program it's a lot to bite off, a lot to chew on. And there are lots of books about, and by Apollo astronauts and about different aspects of the program. But I still feel that Chaikin's book is if you're only going to read one book about Apollo, it's the one to read. It's still got, so Stephen Hackett and I on our Liftoff podcast, one thing that we did was a 50th anniversary episode about every Apollo mission, where we dug in to the details. And I, every time I would go back to Chaikin's book and be amazed at the details that are in that book that still are not found almost anywhere else that he managed to dig out. So yeah, for me, that's the one I keep coming back to if I'm thinking about anything about any particular Apollo mission, as we've been rolling through the 50th anniversaries of all of them, which we just did the last one of those. Apollo Soyuz to come, but it is Chaikin's book. It's so good, and so it's a fun read, and also has incredible detail.
So we've had Andy on the podcast. Show, yeah. I've known him for quite a while, and if you talk to him about that book, I mean, he started that in his 20s and worked for years. Met all the Apollo astronauts, all the moonwalkers. I don't think he missed any of them, and it was just such a passion project. And you're right, going back to it. I probably read it, I don't know, 6 or 7 times, referenced it hundreds, but it's kind of like a delicious, curl up in your cozy in the corner with a crackling fire on a winter night and read a little bit of Chaikin. So yeah, hats off to him. And he's still going strong. So you guys are youngsters to me. So I have to confess that when I first started reading space books, no people had been in space yet. So the first 2 I remember were the Big Book of Space from 1959 and the Golden Book of Spaceflight from 1962, both of which have clapboard covers and little golden curlicues along the spine. And really, for the most part, pretty awful, flat 2D, bold color. Looks like somebody did them with finger paints kind of illustrations. There were some that were kind of cool. And of course, as a kid who was fascinated by space, I was desperate for anything. But this was the day when, even years later, when I was in elementary school, if I went to the school library, and this is in Pasadena, so we're right down the street from JPL and just up the street from Caltech, the only books I could find on space that had any pictures, all the rockets looked like big silver bananas, like a V2. Someday man will land on the moon.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, it seemed silly. And I remember by the time I was a teenager, I thought, it's so ridiculous. Rockets will never look like that when they land on the moon. Well, guess what?
Elon Musk wrote that book too.
Lunar Starship, yeah. So yeah, it's interesting how things kind of come around. I will mention one more quickly. The next one was a book that I got with the proceeds from my 8th grade science fair winnings, which was The Mars Project by Wernher von Braun. And if anybody's ever read that, it's a bit of a slog. It's basically a technical description of how we go to Mars, which was extracted from an absolutely wretched science fiction novel that I'll reference later. But, it was the first time somebody really sat down and run the numbers in that level of detail. And I felt, the most important thing was I felt very important and smart while I was reading it, because I could flash it at my peers and say, I'm reading a book by Wernher von Braun, while they were reading, some important novelist like Bronte or something. So that's me. Tariq, back to you.
Yeah. So from like the beginning of my space interest, I kind of swing back to when I actually became a space writer. And I should point out that a lot of my selections I did pick to kind of not overlap with everyone else, because of course, Man on the Moon is a ringer, I think, for all of us, as you mentioned there. And there's several others that I think we're going to hear about that I don't want to spoil for everybody. But about a year after I started on the beat, maybe it was even the same year. It may have been. It was some friends of mine, Mike Cabbage and Bill Harwood. Those are space reporters. Mike Cabbage was at the Orlando Sentinel back then, and Bill Harwood was at CBS News. They wrote a book called Com Check, and it was all about the Columbia accident, which we're actually coming up on the 20th anniversary now, sadly, of and the all of the different steps that that led up to that tragic accident, where what the issues were with the heat shields and the debris that ultimately led to the destruction of the shuttle upon reentry. All of the crew that was involved, the investigation on the ground about what to do when they spotted the issue, and there is a gripping, and I'm not going to spoil it, but there is a gripping final end of the book about how, basically in real time, how everything happened, that I actually had started reading it like in the evening after work at around 10, and I did not put it down until about 3 a.m. Because I could not stop reading it. And so that was probably the first in real time book I'd read about stuff that I'd actually reported on. And it really, really struck me that there was a different type of a narrative beyond just like the wire news service types of stuff that I've been doing. I started in newspapers for the rest of us to learn about and to think about, because what we're covering is history, both past and present and future now too. And that was kind of the first big example. So it's a really great book if you're looking to learn about the Columbia accident this year. Go back and check out ComCheck.
Jason?
I'm going to jump off of that then and say that one of the most interesting and affecting space-related books that I've read in maybe ever is Bringing Columbia Home, which is by Leinbach, Ward, and Crippen. It is the story of the recovery effort of Columbia in Texas and Louisiana, and how it's the untold story of what happens after that disaster, right? Where pieces of the shuttle and its crew are scattered over an enormous area, and what happened? Like how did they go about trying to retrieve all of that and trying to, get the remains back to the families and trying to assemble the pieces of the shuttle so that they can understand what happened or validate their theories about what happened. And along the way, it's, there's something about it that's adventurous, which is that they go into some wild places in order to find things. And there are people who try to steal stuff that they have to figure out where it's going to. And then also just the thing that has indelibly remained with me from that book is the human toll on the people who are doing this because they think that Columbia and the Columbia astronauts deserve to be taken care of after the fact. And it is harrowing at times about what the people on the ground had to see and do and think about. And it was obviously emotionally exhausting for them, but it was so important to them and to everybody else involved at NASA to sort of do right by Columbia at the end of the process. It's just a fascinating book about something that, got reported like a little bit here and there as it was going on, but to see it all laid out in front of you and to see the human toll on the people who are doing the recovery efforts, just that it goes to some dark places, but it really is a magnificent and very well reported and gripping book. That's Bringing Columbia Home.
That's by Mike Leinbach, right? The shuttle program.
Yeah.
So definitely on the list for sure.
And a Bob Crippen intro, I think too. So it's very good, very affecting. It is dark. I mean, it is, because the subject matter is pretty dark, but just incredibly well done.
So I'll shift gears a little bit, not to dwell on Apollo too much, but I think if you're talking about books written by astronauts, you must read Carrying the Fire by Mike Collins and Return to Earth by Buzz Aldrin. So in Carrying the Fire, Mike did a solo effort, wrote the book himself, worked with editors, of course, like we all do, but it was not ghost written by anybody. And he's a remarkably lyrical, humorous, and yet deeply philosophical guy. And it comes out in this book, and it's a very readable, great introduction for the layman to the Apollo program, especially Apollo 11, if you haven't read it before. But for those of us who are kind of hardcore, we're checking all the boxes and counting the rivets, there's plenty in there as well. But it's his impressions of things that he waxes almost poetic over and over again. And the only complaint I had about the book, I was referencing it for a book I was working on, is that it didn't have an index, which really drove me nuts. But, that was a period of time when not all those books did. But it's really a fun book. And you get a good sense of who Collins was. He's not with us anymore. And who the other crew members were. Because as he wrote in that book, they were amiable strangers, I think, was the term he used. And of all the Apollo crews, especially if you've read Chaikin's book, you kind of come to realize the Apollo 11 crew was an unlikely trio. They worked together very, very well, but they were not people that would have been close buddies outside the program. Whereas you look at Apollo 12 in comparison, and those guys were like brothers, bonded by a very loving connection. So that almost makes Apollo 11 more interesting in a way, because it's such an unlikely story. In contrast, Return to Earth, which was co-written by Buzz and a co-author, was a very introspective, not terribly uplifting book about what he went through coming home. What's remarkable about it to me is, this was, I think, 1970, 71. He was writing this. And he talked about depression, and he talked about how difficult it was to come home after achieving something like that and wondering what's next. He talked about his struggles with alcohol and with antidepressants and so forth. And, these guys are test pilots at that point in NASA's history. You don't talk about those things. There is no such thing as depression. There is no such thing as alcoholism. It's all just part of the good old boys network. And he really, really broke a lot of taboos and stepped way off the farm when he wrote this book. But I think besides being a good read for those of us who were earthbound while this was going on, it kind of was one of the first times somebody took a chisel and cracked open that myth of the invincible astronaut, and made it clear that these are human beings like the rest of us, and they are subject to the same weaknesses and foibles that the rest of us are, if maybe to a slighter degree. So a really remarkable book that way. But above the value of the book as a written tome, just the courage it took for him to step out out of the rank and file and do this. So I thought that was really important. Let's take a break to thank another sponsor, ACI Learning. IT Pro brings you engaging and entertaining IT training. Now, IT Pro is part of ACI Learning. Together, IT Pro and ACI Learning are expanding their production capabilities, bringing you the content and learning style you need at any stage in your professional development. Whether you want individual training for yourself or want to train your whole team, ACI Learning and IT Pro have got you covered. Join over 227,000 members of the IT Pro learning community with access to over 6,800 hours of content, with new content added daily. Get team training for CompTIA, Microsoft IT training, Cisco training, Linux training, Apple training, security, cloud, and more. One of the most widely recognized beginner certifications is the CompTIA A+. CompTIA courses from IT Pro and ACI Learning make it easy to level up your employees who have vested interests in cybersecurity. The most popular certifications offered by ACI Learning include CISSP, AWS, ISACA, and CCNA. Other in-demand tech skills and certification courses offered are Technical Support Specialist, Computer User Support Specialist, Information Security Analyst, and much more. Certifications show more than proving a skill set. They let your customers see that you're committed to keeping your organization up to date. And ACI Learning and IT Pro are with you every step of the way. With an IT Pro business plan, ACI Learning offers fully customizable training for your team. You can track your team's results, manage your seats, assign unassigned team members, and access monthly usage reports. See metrics like logins, viewing time, tracks completed, and more. You can easily manage teams, manage subsets of users or teams by providing them with customized assignments, monitoring progress, and reporting on usage on the platform. Assignments can be full courses and/or individual episodes within courses. Get full access to advanced reporting. You can get immediate insight into your team's viewing patterns and progress over any period of time with visual reports. Respected companies and government agencies around the globe turn to IT Pro and ACI Learning year after year to help them maintain their competitive edge. Supporting organizations across audit, IT, and cybersecurity readiness, ACI Learning keeps you and your team at the top of your game. From entry-level training to putting people on the moon, ACI Learning has got you covered. Maintain your company's competitive edge with ACI Learning and visit go.acilearning.com/twit. That's go.acilearning.com/twit. And for those of you looking to start today with a standard or premium individual IT Pro membership, use TWiT30 to get 30% off. Why don't we each take one more, and then maybe we'll move on to fiction.
Oh yeah, then I'll. I was gonna say I've got copies of both those books. So
yeah, read them.
I'm the slowest reader ever. So no, I think I'll do a two for real quick. And this is again just kind of round out the path. And the first is This New Ocean by William Burroughs, which came out in 98. And the reason I bring that up is because I met Bill Burroughs, or as I like to call him, Mom, when I started studying science reporting at New York University, and I did not know that you could be a space reporter, that it was something that you could do. And then when I met Bill, and learned about this book that he had written, as well as he's written about surveillance satellites and whatnot, that it was a career, and it was like one that was right up my alley, and I was so excited. And This New Ocean is just it chronicles the whole beginning of the space age. And why we're obsessed with the sky and traveling in space, and it goes all the way through the space shuttle and what's coming up for at that point. Paying tickets to go to space, which we didn't do. It was a couple years short of that first paid trip. The station was brand new back then, and it really kind of ties the path of humanity's journey together that I really enjoyed. And then on the other end of that is Missions to the Moon by Rod Pyle, which is about this is a really fun one. If you've never seen it, it's the older version is the one that I have. It's this kind of nice big blocky book that you can open it up, and it has lots of little windows and foibles and letters that you can open up and learn all about going to the moon with NASA and whatnot. And I just think it's adorable, and I had missed it I had missed it at the original release. And this is not an advertisement for Rod, by the way. I really do love this book, and when I found it again, I had to grab it because it had been on my list to try to find for some time. So I just wanted to mention that because
thank you. And I have to tell
read.
A quick story about that book. So it's about a 14 by 14 book and a slipcover, very expensive when it was new and impossible to reproduce today. So I spent probably 6 months all told researching it, going to JSC archives and Kennedy archives and the National Archives with a scanner under one arm and my bulky Mac laptop. This is 2009 and the other. And scanning hundreds and hundreds of documents. I went to the Kansas Cosmosphere and photographed all their paraphernalia there from the Apollo era. So it was a course, for a space author, this is like as good as it gets, right? This is eating dessert every day without having to choke down my vegetables. But I was in the archives at University of Houston, Clear Lake, and I had gone through it. And they, archives, universities don't tend to have huge efforts for archiving, right? In particular, at that facility, at one point Johnson just backed the truck up to the door and pushed out all these boxes, half of unmarked, and said, here's some stuff, make it look pretty, and left. So if you go there now, you can still literally pull a white file box off a shelf and say, what's in here? And I'll say, well, it's stuff from early 60s, I guess. And I pulled out a reel-to-reel tape box, and it said John and Gus. I thought, huh? And it was Glenn and Grissom being interviewed. Hadn't been transcribed, hadn't been converted to digital or anything. But in my first visit there, which was 2009 for this book we're talking about, I was crawling. I had actually climbed up some of the shelves. They didn't have a ladder, so you just try and get a foothold and climb up the shelves to the top. And in a back dusty corner, I found this green ledger that looked like the kind of book you'd keep accounting in. I brought it down. I thought, what's this? And I opened it up. It's got this really crisp, neat, disciplined handwriting in it. And I saw, besides all the pencil stuff, I saw some red pencil that said, lost O2 tank here. And I realized I had found Gene Kranz's log from Apollo 13.
Huh. Wow.
So I took it up to the front desk and said, have you guys been looking for this? And she said, oh my God, I thought we lost that years ago. Thank you. I do have to confess, there was a moment that flashed in my mind of what that would have brought on eBay, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. But it was just, it was transformative finding it. So a closing note on that book, you can still get the old one used on eBay. There are many that are sold for like 60 to 150 bucks that supposedly have my autograph in them. They don't. That's just some schmuck that scrawled his version of my autograph in it and is trying to sell it for lots of money. Don't buy it for that. It's worth about $10 or $15 now. And it was reissued in 2019 by the original publisher, but without the cool glued in envelopes. And, you know, in the original book, you pull out a piece of paper from the glued in envelopes and it's like an FBI memo about Von Braun with coffee stains and rusty paperclip marks and stuff like that. I mean, they really did a nice job of it. The 2019 book, it wasn't as compelling. So yeah, get the old one. All right, I've advertised enough. Jason.
All right. I am also going to do a twofer, which is cheating, but I'm going to do it. You mentioned Apollo books. I'm going to say that my favorite individual astronaut mission book is the obvious one, I know, but it's Jeffrey Kluger and Jim Lovell's Apollo 13, which was originally called Lost Moon. It is the basis of the Tom Hanks movie. It's good. Jim Lovell is a fun character, and that story is, I mean, needs no embellishment. It is such an amazing story, and everybody knows it, but the book is really good, and that's why they made a movie of it. And the one that I wanted to talk about that people may not know is Into the Black by Roland White and Richard Truly, which is the true story about the first space shuttle launch, which as a kid, I watched it, I loved it, paid attention to the whole thing, was very excited by it. But, you know, from the outside, it's like, okay, they did it. Hooray. The real story of that first launch, it is bananas. Like, they're like, is it damaged? Can we land? Are we going to die? Let's get a spy satellite to look at it. Nobody's got authorization. That's the amazing thing is, like, people are listening to our open channel, so we're going to use the teletypewriter, which we can secure to send you secret messages, but you don't see them. So then under the open channel, we have to say, you should check the teletypewriter and get the secret messages. And then there's like literally, people don't have authentic or authorization for the spy satellites. They don't know how good the spy satellites are, but they need that level of detail to check the shuttle to see if it's going to be landable or not. And there's literally a scene in the book where a mysterious man enters a government facility with an envelope, ushers somebody into a room. They lock the door. They take pictures out of the envelope. They're allowed to look at the pictures. After they're done looking, the pictures are placed back in the envelope, and the unnamed mysterious man leaves, never to be seen again, because that is the only way they could communicate the spy satellite information that they needed to check on the shuttle. And those are just a few of the unbelievable things that happened on that mission. You will get to the end and just shake your head like, it's amazing those guys lived, but they did. It all worked out sort of in the end, but just I had no idea. It's such a great story, really well done. So Into the Black, people should check it out. You won't believe it. It's amazing.
They had ejection seats on that flight.
Oh yeah.
I remember that launch and thinking, you know, so in that, I think it was just the first two launches of the shuttle. They had the overhead windows from the pilot station, co-pilot station. The overhead windows could pop out and they could eject, right? Those are the only flights that happened because, of course, if you did it later in the program, you'd be leaving everybody else behind, which is considered poor taste. But you got to wonder, A, would it have worked? And B, at what stage in the shuttle flight can you eject and not get killed? And then later, of course, they had that abandoned ship procedure where if the shuttle was in trouble and you had to get out, everybody was supposed to unstrap, get up on the main deck, line up next to the hatch. You had to assemble a fiberglass pole, stick it out the window while the shuttle was hopefully in a stable glide. And then you had to clip onto that with your parachute on your back, walk out on the wing, and then jump off. I mean, I guess it was to comfort the public, but it's like, you know, no two of those steps can probably be done in real life and be taken seriously. All right. Thank you for that. So I'm going to move on to fiction. My first space book favorite in fiction was called Rusty's Spaceship by Evelyn Sibley Lampman. And it was all about of course, you know, being a young kid enamored of space, It's about some kid that builds a little wooden rocket ship in his background. Alien comes down and leaves a metal disc behind that you can hammer onto the nose of your spaceship, and now it can fly through the universe, and they have great adventures. And there was something in there about magic jelly beans that help them fly. I don't remember the details. It was really silly. I probably read it 40 times. But as more of a grown-up look, I don't think you can do better than The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. It is just such a wonderful stroll through a mythical Mars that of course was not what we were to find. And again, I'm old enough to remember days, not well, but I remember the days before Mariner 4, which flew by Mars in 1965. Up till then, you could still make the argument that there was this wave of darkening on Mars seasonally, and maybe those were plants, and there could be forests and six-legged thoats and guys with swords and who knows what. I mean, if you really want to see a wild fantasy, read any book by Percival Lowell, who took the slimmest of evidence and developed an incredible Martian civilization out of it. But, and this is, the end of the Victorian era, but you can look at Lowell's books and see how he drew his conclusions. They do make sense. But The Martian Chronicles is just a wonderful, there's a lot of parallels between what happened in the Americas between European settlers and the First Nations folks. But it's a really wonderful, fanciful look at what could have happened at Mars had it been the Mars it turned out not to be.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So yeah, my pick, I guess for this part of it, the most recent one for me is Deep Six by Jack McDivitt for a couple of reasons. So yeah, if you're not familiar with Jack McDivitt, a phenomenal sci-fi author, inspiration to me because he started later in life, which means I still have hope, because that's the whole reason I became a quote unquote writer in the first place.
Are you going to write fiction?
I had wanted to write science fiction for my life, and my mom convinced me to be a reporter.
The secret's out.
But I stumbled upon Deep Six. I think I found it at the office one time, and it's about, it's in the year 2022, 24, and it follows this ace pilot Priscilla Hutchins. It's a whole series of novels with her. It turned out, and they're unput down a little because it's like adventure after adventure, like Indiana Jones in space.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they go to a planet after like 20 years after like a failed expedition where almost everyone died, and there's like a disgraced commander, but the planet, which is teeming with life, they've just discovered a new ruins of a civilization, but the planet's going to get destroyed when it collides with a Jupiter, a super Jupiter. And so they're like, we got to find out what happened there, before this all happens. And so they send Priscilla, who's the only ship in the quadrant, with their own space reporter, like a celebrity writer who travels the stars. And there's lots of drama and lots of excitement, but it is just, Jack McDivitt has this tendency to just have a tension and an action that ratchets up and up and up the deeper you get into the book. And there's an overarching arc and all of this Priscilla Hutchins series about these omega clouds that are out, terrorizing the galaxy, and you learn a little bit more of them along the way. And there's just crazy. There's like a skyhook where they snatch people off the planet from like deep space. We're using 3 different ships, and it's crazy, and I've read that book 3 or 4 times all the way through just to get to that last chapter for that scene, and it is absolutely amazing. So that's my big plug. That's my first one that I wanted to make sure that I chimed out. It's a lot of fun. So
yeah, I've read all of the McDivitt books, and Deep Six I think is the best one because it is the wildest premise, and the idea that you've got like a rogue planet that's going to eat another planet that's full of life that nobody's ever investigated, and so we've got a ticking clock to investigate the mysteries of a whole planet in a very, very limited amount of time. It's just the stakes are high. It's wild, but I love all of his books, but that's really great. I'm gonna cheat and do a really quick twofer here, just a classic and a current. The one I go back to all the time is actually 2010 Odyssey 2 by Arthur C. Clarke. If you've seen the movie, you know the general plot, although the best scene in the book is not in the movie. It is. And if you love the Stanley Kubrick film and you're like, what the fact is that film was a collaboration between him and Clarke. And this is Clarke saying, I want to explore sort of like those ideas a little bit more. And it's readable, it's fun, It's got a lot of wild moments in it. It's got some chilling moments in it. I love that book. I haven't read it, I think, since New Year's Eve 2010, but I've read it like 15, 20 times. I love it. Modern space books, and I tried to limit myself to sort of spacey space books, is the Lady Astronaut series by Mary Robinette Kowal. The first two are The Calculating Stars and The Faded Sky. It's alt history in the sense that the history of this Earth, there's a catastrophic event that leads to the space race happening much faster. But it's still a very much, she wants to tell stories about early, a little like For All Mankind, actually. It's sort of like the early exciting days of space, and then they go to the moon and Mars very quickly. So there's a lot more kind of drama than ended up happening in our world. They're so good. They're 3. There are more coming. Mary Robinette Kowal. So I highly recommend those. They're they're page turners. They got good character bits. They got good space stuff in it. It just, if you want to recapture sort of like, we know what happened in our early days of space, right? This is like that, like you're reading a history of their early days of space, but you don't know what's going to happen because it's made up. So that's the beauty of the alt history part of it. So yeah, highly recommended.
I just finished The Faded Sky, the second book in that series this week. So highly agree.
There is a harrowing scene about, I'll just say, what happens if somebody dies on the way to Mars?
Oh my gosh.
What would you do? Yeah. It's great. Great book.
Yeah. That's what
2 stars you get through that space.
There's a bag. It's actually based on a real conversation apparently that NASA had about what would happen in an extended duration trip if somebody died. And, there's a bag and an airlock, and it's not great.
Yeah.
All right. Let me give a couple of bookenders here, era-wise. So, having spent much of my youth reading pulpy things, I got very much into space opera in the 1960s, and right at the height of that was a book by a relatively unheralded science fiction author named Richard Meredith, who I think he died in his 40s, so he hadn't had a chance to write a lot. But he wrote a book, it's very underappreciated, called "We All Died at Breakaway Station." And it's got, the classic fleets of Earth ships protecting our planet from the bad guys who are called the Jillies, which is kind of a weird name. But it's very much a product of its time. And there's a lot of kind of groovy 1960s, paisley and flares in there. So you can get that impression. But it is a fun read. It's a great a little adventure story. And Meredith really understood space opera, which is one of my favorite forms. On the other end of time, I recently finished Critical Mass by Daniel Suarez, who's doing a triangulation for episode for the TWiT network, and who will also be coming with us next week. Right, Tariq?
Yeah, that's right. I'm really excited.
It's have you read it, Jason?
I haven't. I read his first one, but I haven't read the
Delta V.
One.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, New York Times bestseller, all the greatest plaudits you can get. It's interesting because in a way it's very procedural. It's as if he took a handbook, a technical handbook for the future, and broke it down into individual steps and then recombined them in an interesting way and put it in a fictional setting. So it talks about how you build infrastructure to use cislunar space, and it talks about putting mass drivers on the moon so you can get mass off the surface up to a Lagrange point where you can assemble it into space stations and rocket ships and robots and meatloaf and whatever else you're going to do with lunar resources. And it's for people who are members of or work with groups like the National Space Society, which is who I publish Ad Astra for, this is kind of the holy grail, because it's like, okay, it's saying, here's all the things you guys want. Here's the things you've been talking about for the last 40 years. Here's how it could play out. And there's, of course, the requisite drama with, foreign powers not wanting the Americans to have full control of something happening in cislunar space and so forth. So it's a great romp. I need to go back and read the first book, Delta V. But and if you get a chance, I'd suggest you read them in sequence.
It's a good book.
But it really was.
Yeah.
If nobody else has anything burning a hole in their metal pockets, I want to mention 2 candidates for the Darwin Space Books Awards, if I may.
Can I throw in a couple more sci-fi books before we move on? Just I'm going to do another pair here. Classic. If you haven't read it, you should go seek it out. It's Inherit the Stars by James P. Hogan. He actually lived in my town when I was growing up, and I met him. He made a bet he worked at Digital Equipment in the UK in the 70s, and he saw some bad science fiction movie and said, I could write a better story than that. And a guy he worked with said, I'll bet you a tenner that you can't. And he, on a bet, wrote Inherit the Stars, which became the first in a whole series, and he quit his job and became a professional science fiction writer. And the premise of the book is there's some people on the moon, some astronauts on the moon, and they go over a ridge, and on the other side, they find a dead body in a spacesuit. And this is like, they're the only people on the moon. Where did this body come from? And it's the cover of the book. And then he scientifically, I mean, some of the stuff has been sort of disproven by our science and then in recent eras about how the moon was formed and all of that. But like he lives up to that premise, and it is I mean, it's it's a little dated in terms of the writing, but it's a classic, and it's super fun, and he walks through the scientific logic. The logic of the characters trying to figure out how the impossible could be possible is something to see. And then more recently, a book that I think plays fair with space, at least to a point, and you may know the TV series, is the Expanse series by James S.A. Corey.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to highlight it because it's like, I love seeing a science fiction series that, especially one that's successful, that knows how physics works and tries to actually, I mean, again, they cut corners here and there, but they actually, like, in terms of moving through the solar system and velocities and gravity and how you have to deal with high gravity with the human body and all these things, they care about it, and they're trying to do right by the laws of physics. And when I mean, space opera is great, and breaking the laws of physics can be fun, but it is really fun to see somebody say, no, we're going to try to play fair with the laws of physics while we tell our sci-fi story. And the Expanse series, which is great, does that. So that's it. Those are my last two.
Yeah, great respect to Expanse for not having magic push-button gravity like every Star Trek spinoff ever did. All right, very quickly, Space Darwin Book Awards. Project Mars, A Technical Tale by Werner von Braun, copyrighted 1949. So the Mars Project nonfiction telling of how we could get to Mars with a fleet of 10 ships and winged landers and all this stuff was actually the appendix to a science fiction novel that von Braun wrote while he was cooling his rockets at White Sands, New Mexico for a few years after World War II, and we wouldn't let him do much except play with nose cones. He wrote a science fiction novel, and it's very possibly one of the worst science fiction novels of all time. He submitted it to all the usual suspects, who roundly rejected it, and it wasn't published till I think 2006. So I had to buy it, and it's got a young hero driving a Jaguar and attractive maidens in distress and all the usual stuff. And it was good that he was a great engineer, because he was not a particularly gifted writer. My second candidate is anything written by Richard Hoagland.
Yeah.
Who we know from such classics as Dark Mission, The Secret History of NASA. If you read any of his books,
I was a teenager in the mid 80s, I got Analog magazine, and they had a science fact, mind you, article called The Curious Case of the Humanoid Face on Mars, which was about the Cydonia region and that thing that looks sort of like a face if you looked at it. And that was by Richard Hoagland. And I read it and I was like, this is nonsense. And then only like a decade or more later, when I was in college and out of college, did I discover that Hoagland made a whole career at writing nonsense like that. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, the guy should be embarrassed. That said, he made a lot of money at that, and he was at JPL for a time, and left under curious circumstances that I don't know a lot about, because they don't like talking about it. But if you read Dark Mission or any of these other books, I mean, the leaps of logic,
it's amazing,
that it would take to come to these conclusions. And as you mentioned, the face in Cydonia, I mean, you know, subsequent orbiters have gone over that same region to photograph it. NASA very specifically tasked, I think it was MRO, or maybe it was
it's a couple of hills. That's all it is.
And you can see the runoff channels
Yeah.
And, there are no eyes. There's no mouth.
But Hoagland,
that's just what they're telling you.
A lot of people were talking. That's what they want you to think.
Photoshop.
A lot of people was stopped at the face, and they're like, "Oh, this is interesting, weird, right?" Hoagland is like, "No, but if you draw a line from the face out to this other formation, it's a pyramid." And seriously,
and it's a pentagram.
Come on, man.
Yeah,
come on, man.
Yeah, he's well, being in his mind must be an interesting place. I don't want to libel him too much, but it's just not my kind of reading.
It's not science.
I want to thank both of you, but especially you, Jason, for joining us today.
Thank you
for our look at
me.
awesome space books. And 6colors.com is, I guess, one place we can get. Yeah, that's the best place.
Yeah, 6colors.com is a great place.
Okay. It's a wonderful website. And there's a lot of, if you're a Mac guy, Tariq, smart enough to be a Mac guy, it's a great place to go get your fix.
Check it out.
And speaking of such things, Tariq, where can we track your incredible life?
Well, I will be reminiscing on the books I didn't get to talk about: The Martian, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I, Robot, and The Wreck of the River of Stars. Everyone should look up those titles because they're great. And I am basking this weekend in the glow of the warm Rocket Lab Electron launch from U.S. soil that I watched. I drove 10 hours to watch it launch this week in Virginia from New Jersey, and it was glorious and amazing, even though we just had some Cheez-Its and coffee, whereas the VIP tent may have had pulled pork barbecue and champagne.
Oh, cry me a river, journalist.
But still, it was amazing. And if you live on the East Coast, go see a launch from NASA's Wallops Flight Facility. It is amazing. I'm still geeking out about it. Also, at space.com, on Twitter, at Tariq J. Malik.
Yeah, okay. And you can always see me at pylebooks.com or at astromagazine.com. And I am on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram from time to time. Please don't forget to drop us a line at twists@twit.tv. That's TWIS at twit.tv. We always welcome your comments, suggestions, and ideas. We answer every single email, and we love hearing from you. New episodes published every Friday on your favorite podcatcher, so make sure to subscribe, tell your friends, give us reviews, give us 5 stars or thumbs up or a smiley face or whatever the appropriate gesture is, because we want to spread the word. And don't forget, you can get all the great programming on the TWiT network ad-free on Club TWiT, as well as some extras that are only available there for just $7 a month. That's a bargain. You can't even get a grilled cheese sandwich for that much. And you can follow the TWiT Tech Podcast Network at TWiT on Twitter and on Facebook, and twit.tv on Instagram. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am Ant Pruitt, and I am the host of Hands On Photography here on TWiT TV. I know you got yourself a fancy smartphone, you got yourself a fancy camera, but your pictures are still lacking. Can't quite figure out what the heck shutter speed means? Watch my show. I got you covered. Want to know more about just the ISO and exposure triangle in general? Yeah, I got you covered. Or if you got all of that down, you want to get into lighting, making things look better by changing the lights around you. I got you covered on that too. So check us out each and every Thursday here on the network. Go to twit.tv/hop and subscribe today.